Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, finally, at last. Friday, June. No, well, what the hell? Let's say it's July. Year's over. Goodbye, everybody. It's 2025. All right, it is 25-something. Anyway, 25 June, the way they write the dates anyway, in British newspapers. But June 25th, 2021, time for yet another show. And how well does the well-oiled machinery of Kagro in the morning really work? Well, I'll tell you, it's all right. How's that? No, I got the morning tweet here from Bill in Portland, Maine, and I was all set to read it, and I was getting ready to retweet it and get ready to read it, and I noticed, I'm looking in my KITM hashtag column on TweetDeck, and I see it right up at the top here, and I'm all set to retweet it, or hit the button to retweet it, and I see there's already a retweet of this thing, and I said, this must be yesterday's tweet, still sitting at the top of that column for whatever, although usually there's, a good 5-6 things that'll displace it during the course of a show, but I thought that must be what the case was, and then I thought, all right, well, I guess maybe I don't retweet this one because I've already done this one. Oh, no, wait a second. No, this is a new one. And it was the mighty OCD had already jumped in and retweeted the morning tweet and threw me off my game, if that was really even a game. Does that really count as game? That's not much of a game. Okay. Well, anyway, that's what's going on in the headquarters this morning. And that's it. That's all the news there is. Here's the tweet, just so you know. For, posterity's sake, right? The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. This is all true so far. I'm fact-checking them as we go along. Thanks to the new bipartisan infrastructure deal, Kagro X is broadcasting from a new suspension bridge, and it was windy in here, connecting his fridge to his microwave. It even has a flag on top, and it stays there. It's good luck charm for construction. And we're going to put an extra 6 or 7 of them on our lapels as well, just so everyone can tell that we are patriotic and pass all the right tests. Plenty to go on this morning. Lots of things I've been saving from earlier in the week past, probably the week before that, months and months ago. I've been saving things since forever, and I got to start gearing up for some of these shows that, and I got to start preparing you for shows that we will miss. Live broadcasts that simply won't be, period, the end. They're not going to be live. I don't know whether they're going to be at all, as a matter of fact. And I think we can prepare for them ahead of time. The first one, routine business. I was telling Greg during one of the breaks yesterday, next Wednesday, an unavoidable absence as, once a year, these doctors, they tell you, you got to come in and get things checked out, make sure you're still alive. That you could probably do by phone. Now you can tell the marvels of telemedicine. Are you alive? Yes. That I can do. But you come in, you get they take the blood out of you, which I always thought was supposed to stay in you, but whatever, check you out, all that stuff, but they also require fasting for the blood tests and all that, and so I did it once where I said, you know what, I have a show to do, you're going to have to simply do this after the show, and then I realized, well, okay, then they were like, well, we don't really have time for you until 2 p.m., and then, well, do I really want to fast all day waiting to then go get stuck with a needle? So, yeah, I give in. I'm going to go in at 9 o'clock when I should normally be here and deal with that. Whether or not we can prepare a recorded show depends on, I don't know, my willingness to do that, and probably over the weekend at that. But there's lots of stories we could catch up on. It makes a good opportunity to get to the old stories, but then I want to stay relevant, so I end up cutting the thing on Tuesday afternoon after the Tuesday show gets broadcast. It's a little rough. But more to the point is the fact that August will be let's use the internet term, disruptive. We're disrupting the dominant paradigm. And the dominant paradigm is where we do a show every day. And I'm disrupting that by not doing one at the beginning of 2 weeks of August at a minimum when it's vacation time. And I think once, during the Iceland vacation, we were able to prepare a bunch of pre-recorded shows, but also, in the end, we had to rely on some reruns. This is going to be a 2-week jaunt, so it's going to be awfully unlikely that we can prepare 10 pre-recorded shows of enough relevance to just, to say this makes sense. So instead, we'll bring you probably at least 5 totally irrelevant shows from last year. I don't know if that's really a great trade. I didn't think this through, but I don't know how else to handle it. But don't be too disappointed. Sometimes it pays to play one of these old shows just to see where you were a year ago. And especially since we were in the midst of a campaign, mired in our 4th year of the Trump administration, in scare quotes, it might be worth pointing out just how close to the edge and how perilous things were way back then. And as a matter of fact, there are some topics we could cover today that might bring you back to that. For instance, something I just saw Greg sharing on his day off. He's got several of them, but saw him sharing on Twitter just recently a ProPublica story. New details, and we always love new details, suggest senior Trump aides knew January 6th rally could get chaotic. In fact, it got more than chaotic. It got violent and seditious. But, they're being careful over there, and where it's not entirely clear how much of the violence and sedition these aides knew, according to these KNEW, these aides KNEW knew, according to these NEW knew details. I'm just, in case we have any English as a second language learners out there, I just want to clarify things for people. Text messages and interviews show that Stop the Steal leaders fooled the Capitol Police and welcomed racists to increase their crowd size. They are racist, but okay. While White House officials worked to both contain and appease them. Well, that's your answer. So they weren't contained or appeased. So you might wonder, well, what was the plan exactly? And then you realize that the answer is in the question. Trump White House officials worked to do that? Well, no wonder they couldn't contain or appease them. It was their job to contain and appease them. And they're never going to be able to accomplish that. Let's dive in, because it's huge and long, and maybe we can do right by everyone by actually getting through the story if we're careful. On December 19th, President Donald Trump blasted out a tweet to his 88 million followers, inviting supporters to Washington for a, quote, wild protest. Earlier that week, one of his senior advisors had released a 36-page report alleging significant evidence of election fraud that could reverse Joe Biden's victory. A great report, Trump wrote. Statistically impossible. Or I guess that he would say statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild. I know we've heard that one before. The tweet worked like a starter's pistol. Ooh, a gun metaphor. That's great. With 2 pro-Trump factions competing to take control of the big protest. On one side stood Women for America First. Interesting name. Led by Amy Kramer, I guess, Kremer, a Republican operative who helped found the Tea Party movement. And they're back in force, making noise at all of our school board meetings. Perhaps we can revisit that a little bit later today. The group initially wanted to hold a kind of extended oral argument with multiple speakers making their case for how the election had been stolen. On the other hand, there was Stop the Steal, a new, more radical group that had recruited avowed racists to swell its ranks and wanted the president to share the podium with Alex Jones, the radio host banned from the world's major social media platforms for hate speech, misinformation, and glorifying violence. Sounds like a good idea. Stop the Steal organizers say their plan was to march on the Capitol and demand that lawmakers give Trump a second term. I think they won in the end, in terms of controlling the direction of the event. ProPublica has obtained new details about the Trump White House's knowledge of the gathering storm after interviewing more than 50 people involved in the events of January 6th and reviewing months of private correspondence. Taken together, these accounts suggest that senior Trump aides had been warned the January 6th events could turn chaotic, with tens of thousands of people potentially overwhelming ill-prepared law enforcement officials. Rather than trying to halt the march, Trump and his allies accommodated its leaders, according to text messages and interviews with Republican operatives and officials. Katrina Pearson, remember that nut? A former Trump campaign official, also a former Tea Party organizer and grifter, the former Trump campaign official assigned by the White House to take charge of rally planning, helped arrange a deal where those organizers deemed too extreme to speak at the Ellipse could do so on the night of January 5th. That event ended up including incendiary speeches from Jones and Ali Alexander, the leader of Stop the Steal, who fired up his followers with a chant of victory or death. And they didn't get victory, but they did get a little bit of death. And I guess they were hoping for much more. By the way, I think he's one of the organizers most famously on the lam since then, in hiding, running from a fugitive from justice, you could legitimately say. The record of what White House officials knew about January 6th and when they knew it remains incomplete. Key officials, including White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, declined to be interviewed for the story. I would, if I were his lawyer, tell him to decline as well. The second impeachment of President Trump focuses mostly on his public statements, including his January 6th exhortation that the crowd march on the Capitol and, quote, fight like hell. Trump was acquitted by the Senate, and his lawyers insisted that the attack on the Capitol was both regrettable and unforeseeable. Rally organizers interviewed by ProPublica said that they did not expect January 6th to culminate with the violent sacking of the Capitol, but it did. But they acknowledged they were worried about plans by Stop the Steal to organize an unpermitted march that would reach the steps of the building as Congress gathered to certify the election results. We don't know what's going to happen, but we are a little concerned that their plan is to march over there without a permit. Remember all the racists and violent people we had invited? Yeah. So they're going to go over there, and they say their aim is to stop the electoral vote count, and I assume they'll do that by tweeting from outside the building, but very harshly. Yeah, I don't think that was anybody's plan. One of the Women for America First organizers told ProPublica let me just repeat that. The Women for America First organizers, well, among them, he and his group, felt they needed to urgently warn the White House of the possible danger. And probably they should have warned them and say, yeah, this whole group about Women for America First is engineered and run by men, but you probably would have guessed that because it's a Republican group. A last-minute march, the organizer said, without a permit, without all the Metro police that'd usually be there to fortify the perimeter, felt unsafe. Dustin Stockton said in a recent interview, and he was right. And these people aren't there for we'll just quote them the best we can here. And these people aren't there for a effing flower contest, added Jennifer Lynn Lawrence, Stockton's fiance and co-organizer. I'm glad he promoted her to co-organizer of Women for America First. They're there because they're angry. That's true. I pause a little bit, not only, of course, because it's interesting here that in Women for America First, one, co-organized by a man. Two, the woman that helps co-organize is the fiance, and I guess, why not? It's a close partner, etc. And the only one cursing, though, is the woman, so I guess good for you. But also interesting, I would never think to say, well, these violent people, they're not going to stay peaceful because what do you think? They're here for a effing, I would probably never follow that up with flower contest. What's a flower contest? They're not here for a effing flower contest. They're not here for a effing Dorito cook-off. What? I don't know. And I screwed that up even because, at least Doritos is food. A flower contest? Like a flower show? Yeah, it's a contest. Flower contest. All right. whatever. They're not here for a, football exhibition competition. Game? Yes, game. Right. What do Americans say? The flower contest. Okay. Just pointing that out. Stockton said he and Kramer initially took their concerns to Pearson. Well, that's crazy. She's stupid. She's never going to be able to help you. Feeling that they weren't gaining enough traction, Stockton said he and Kramer agreed to call Meadows directly. Kramer, who has a personal relationship with Meadows dating back to his early days in Congress, said she would handle the matter herself. Soon after, Kramer told Stockton, quote, the White House would take care of it, which he interpreted to mean she had contacted top officials about the march. Kramer denied that she ever spoke with Meadows or any other White House official about her January 6th concerns. Oh, you want to cover yourself, wouldn't you? Why would you deny it? Also, no one on my team was talking to them that I was aware of, she said in an email to ProPublica. Meadows declined to comment on whether he'd been contacted. A December 27th text from Kramer, obtained by ProPublica, casts doubt on her assertion. Written at a time when her group was pressing to control the upcoming January 6th rally, it refers to Alexander and Cindy Chafin, an activist who worked closely with Alex Jones. Which one? Alex Chafin or Cindy Chafin? An activist team that worked? I don't know. The White House and Team Trump are aware of the situation with Ali and Cindy. Okay, so Cindy's the tough one here. Good. So the White House and Team Trump are aware of these two. Kramer wrote, I need to be the one to handle both. That was a dumb idea. Kramer did not answer questions from ProPublica about the text. So far, congressional and law enforcement reconstructions of January 6th. And by the way, can I just emphasize the need for reconstruction? That would be a great idea right about now. Not this kind, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know what I mean. So far, congressional and law enforcement reconstructions of January 6th have established failures of preparedness and intelligence sharing by the U.S. Capitol Police, the FBI, and the Pentagon, which is responsible for deploying the D.C. National Guard. But those reports have not addressed the role of White House officials in the unfolding events and whether officials took appropriate action before or during the rally. Legislation that would have authorized an independent commission to investigate further was quashed by Senate Republicans. Yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced, oh yes, good, this loops in another story. You remember we heard, oh yes, we're going to have a special committee, a select committee in the House, and then, wait a minute, no, I never said that. You've jumped the gun. I never said we were going to do that. That is a false report. And now today, or yesterday really, we're back to, all right, it was just a matter of timing. Yes, we are going to have that. And here, this loops that in. Yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced that she would create a select committee to investigate January 6th that would not require Republican support. Fine. It's not certain whether Meadows and other aides would be willing to testify. Internal White House dealings have historically been subject to claims of executive privilege by both Democratic and Republican administrations. That, by the way, sets up the possibility that Merrick Garland's Department of Justice might advise the Biden White House, which holds the executive privilege at this point. I mean, Trump can't presumably directly invoke executive privilege when he's no longer the chief executive, but sometimes the successor administration will invoke it in place of the prior administration with the notion that this is something akin to a professional courtesy, but really about preserving the prerogatives of the presidency for yourself and for your successors, and usually done in the hope that that is a tradition that will continue and that the next president will likewise protect the interests of the presidency by protecting the Biden administration. Although I have yet to see, I think, generally speaking, Republican administrations invoke the privilege in favor of previous Democratic administrations in a high-profile case. But then again, they've rarely been asked to because, for the most part, it's the Republicans doing things that require this sort of cover-up. to be honest, at least of late, anyhow. Let's see. So where were we here? Our reporting, that is ProPublica's, raises new questions that will not be answered unless Trump insiders tell the story of that day. It remains unclear, for example, precisely what Meadows and other White House officials learned of safety concerns about the march and whether they took those reports seriously. I, of course, have the related question of why are we not asking about why there was no additional security implemented in any noticeable way on January 6th at the White House, because that's an important question. There was an insurrection 2 miles down the road that threatened the lives of the Vice President, Speaker of the House, and Senate President pro tem, the second, third, and fourth in line to the presidency, such that they were evacuated by the Secret Service under threat of death, and no calls to the White House to say that that was happening, and no reaction at the White House in terms of moving the guy to the bunker, the former guy, to the bunker, or adding any extra security. They moved him to the bunker during the Black Lives Matter protest previous June, but nothing now. And that's, of course, everyone speculates because he was in control of the insurrection and knew that it wouldn't be coming for him. It was his people at the Capitol pulling this stunt, and he was unlikely to consider himself to be in danger from them. And so therefore, White House pool reporters noted no exceptional activity whatsoever. Calm at the White House. Busy but calm in the middle of an armed insurrection at the Capitol. The former president has a well-established pattern of bolstering far-right groups while he and his aides attempt to maintain some distance. Following the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Trump at first appeared to tacitly support torch-bearing white supremacists, later backing off. But actually, if we're speaking of appearances, it was really the appearance of backing off more than anything else. And in one presidential debate, he appeared to offer encouragement to the Proud Boys, a group of street brawlers who claimed to protect Trump supporters, his statement triggering a dramatic spike in their recruitment. Trump later disavowed his support, but again, he really didn't. ProPublica has learned that White House officials worked behind the scenes to prevent the leaders of the march from appearing on stage and embarrassing the president. But Trump then undid those efforts with his speech, urging the crowd to join the March on the Capitol, organized by the very people who had been blocked from speaking. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, he said. You remember all of that. Next section here. On November 5th, as Joe Biden began to emerge as the likely winner of the 2020 presidential election, it's November 5th here, a far-right provocateur named Ali Alexander assembled a loose collection of right-wing activists to help Trump maintain the presidency, to which he was not entitled. Alexander approached the cause of overturning the election with an almost messianic fervor, always the hallmark of a stable guy. In private text messages, he obsessed over gaining attention from Trump and strategized about how to draw large, angry crowds in support of him. On November 7th, the group held simultaneous protests in all 50 states. 7 days later, its members traveled to Washington for the Million MAGA March, which drew tens of thousands, which ordinarily is a large crowd. But when you call it the Million MAGA March, it's just setting yourself up for disappointment. The event is now considered by many to be a precursor of January 6th. Alexander united them under the battle cry, "Stop the Steal," a phrase originally coined by former Trump advisor Roger Stone, whom Alexander has called a friend. Parenthetically, they add here, Stone launched a short-lived organization of the same name in 2016, when they didn't turn out to need it. But you can see this was always the plan. If they didn't win the election, whether it was 2016 or 2020, or 21 for that matter. What was that voice crack? That hasn't happened in about 40 years, but okay. Basically, the plan is always, well, if we don't win, we can always resort to violence. Great. Good to know. To draw such crowds, Alexander made clear Stop the Steal would collaborate with anyone who supported its cause, no matter how extreme their views. What would be the point of weeding out extremist views from a Trump rally, right? We're willing to work with racists. This is a quote, by the way. We're willing to work with racists, he said on one live stream in December. Well, thank you for being open. Alexander did not return requests for comment made by email, by voicemail, to his recent attorney, or to Stop the Steal PAC's designated agent. That's because he's in hiding. As he worked to expand his influence, Alexander found a valuable ally in Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist at the helm of the popular far-right website InfoWars. Jones, who first gained notoriety for spreading a lie that the Sandy Hook school shooting was a hoax, had once counted more than 2 million YouTube subscribers and 800,000 Twitter followers before being banned from both platforms. Alexander also collaborated with Nick Fuentes, the 22-year-old leader of the white nationalist Groyper movement. We've mentioned them in the past. 30% of that crowd was Alex Jones's crowd, Alexander said on another live stream, referring to the Million MAGA march on November 14th. And there were thousands and thousands of Groypers, America First young white men. Even if you thought these were bad people, why can't bad people do good tasks? Why can't bad people fight for their country? And it's because they have the wrong idea of what their country is about and what it needs, and they're dangerous, and you stay away from them because they're bad people. Alexander's willingness to work with such people sparked conflict even within his inner circle. And I'm sure no one was happy about him going on radio and saying, well, we're willing to work with racists. You're probably not supposed to say that out loud. Is Nick Fuentes now a prominent figure in Stop the Steal? Asked Brandon Straka, an openly gay conservative activist, problem there, in a November text message obtained exclusively by ProPublica. I find him disgusting, Straka said, pointing to Fuentes' vehemently anti-LGBT views. Okay, well, we've got that and much more to follow up with in this story, and tying it to a number of others. It's going to be a big day for this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's just continue, shall we, with the ProPublica, major ProPublica publishing event about the new details about what insiders at the White House knew about January 6th. I need to know this stuff. I think you do too. It seems to be like it'll be a big topic of weekend conversation and into next week, especially assuming that there's no reversal of the decision to appoint a special or select committee in the House to investigate the events of January 6th. So, where were we? We were basically at the point where organizers of Stop the Steal said, hell, we'll take anyone. Racists, fine. The more the better. Ali Alexander, the organizer we're talking about, saw more people and more power, I guess, in all of this. He wrote that Fuentes was, quote, very valuable at putting bodies in places. He's still talking about live bodies here, but probably skilled at, would like people to think that he's skilled at placing dead bodies places as well, and that both Jones and Fuentes were, quote, willing to push bodies where we point. He obviously saw this as a real personal power move. Straka, Fuentes, and Jones, guess what? Did not respond to requests for comment. Right-wing leaders who had once known each other only peripherally were now feeling a deeper sense of camaraderie. In an interview, Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio described how he felt as he walked alongside Jones through the crowds assembled in Washington on November 14th after Jones had asked the Proud Boys to act as his informal bodyguards. And they need a lot of them. He's got a large body. That was the moment we really united everybody under one banner, he said, that everyone thought, he, of course, doesn't hesitate to use the wording, but F you, this is what we can do. According to Tario, the Proud Boys nearly tripled in numbers around this time, bringing in over 20,000 new members. November was the seed that sparked that flower. There's flowers again. On January 6th, he said. It's basically that they all figured they could get together and beat up people they didn't like very much because they thought the president would pardon them for it anyway, which is awfully dumb because, of course, assault charges are, generally speaking, state-level charges, but whatever. Oh, and also the president was extremely lazy and self-centered and never had any intention of pardoning anyone from anything that wasn't a personal friend of his already. Anyway, the crowds impressed people like Tom Van Flein. It's Van, F-L-E-I-N. Chief of Staff for Representative Paul Gosar, Republican of Arizona, hated by his family. You may know the guy. Van Flein told ProPublica he kept in regular contact with Alexander while Gosar led the effort in Congress to shoot down the election certification. Ali was very talented and put on some very good rallies on short notice, Van Flein said. Great turnout. But as January 6th drew nearer, the Capitol Police became increasingly concerned by the disparate elements that formed the rank and file of the organization. Stop the Steal's propensity to attract white supremacists, militia members, and others who actively promote violence may lead to a significantly dangerous situation for law enforcement and the general public alike, the Capitol Police wrote in a January 3rd intelligence assessment. And I might as well comment at this point, since they're running photos illustrating this ProPublica piece along with all the text I'm reading you. Ali Alexander, Nick Fuentes, Enrique Tario, all are visibly, let's say, darker than you might think of when you're thinking about bringing together a network of white supremacists. But that doesn't get in the way of their organizing for white supremacy either, and doing so openly. I don't know whether it's a case of, what the hell's the difference? Who cares about logic? I don't know if it's these leopards won't eat my face if I organize this thing for them. I don't know if it's a case of white supremacy being espoused just for convenience sake to bring in more bodies and participants, and they didn't give any thought to the question of whether, or they never intended to appear before the group anyway, or whether their white supremacy or their adherence to it is questionable from whatever direction. It's just an interesting thing to note for the record. And I'm sure that's something that they would throw out there in their defense if they were ever brought to justice. How could I be a white supremacist? And it might even work. Anyway, where were we here? Yes, yet the police force, for all of its concern, we note here that the January 3rd intelligence assessment says they were kind of getting the idea that this could be problematic. And yet, for all its concern, they wound up effectively blindsided by what happened on January 6th. An intelligence report from that day obtained by ProPublica shows that the Capitol Police expected a handful of rallies on Capitol grounds, the largest of which would be hosted by a group called One Nation Under God. Where'd they get that from? Law enforcement anticipated between 50 and 500 people at the gathering, assigning it the lowest possible threat score and predicting a 1 to 5% chance of arrests. The police gave much higher threat scores to two small anti-Trump demonstrations planned elsewhere in the city. However, One Nation Under God was a fake name used to trick the Capitol Police into giving Stop the Steal a permit, according to Stop the Steal organizer Kimberly Fletcher. Like, how do you find that out? Well, we just told her. Fletcher is president of Moms for America, a grassroots organization founded to combat, quote, radical feminism. And it's interesting. This all, by the way, I mean, yes, I will acknowledge that there's also another story out there in wide circulation this morning and much talked about in the New York Times, mostly about the Project Veritas related, what shall we call it, infiltrators into Democratic organizations out in the states, under the title you may have seen of, "They seemed like Democratic activists. They were secretly conservative spies." I just find that interesting. A lot of people talking about that. Possibly we can turn to that later on. Who knows what kind of time we're going to have left after reading through this thing. But it's just an interesting parallel that both of these organizations, so reliant on essentially just lying to local authorities, like to get the permit, you just say, "Oh, we're a small group called One Nation Under God." Actually, we're Stop the Steal. But if we did that, you would recognize us and you wouldn't give us the permit. Just like over here in ProPublica, their thing I was commenting today, they are always about undercover sting operations, trying to uncover the evil that the Democrats are secretly doing. And of course, their name, Project Veritas, like, "Oh, we're only after the truth. We're about truth and transparency." What's your plan, by the way, for bringing truth and transparency to politics? Well, our plan is lying and hiding. Lying and hiding for truth and transparency. Okay, very good. Let's just continue on, shall we? All right, just pointing that out. It was no surprise to you. Just seemed like a good point to make alongside the rest of this. So where were we? Yes, One Nation Under God tricks the Capitol Police into giving Stop the Steal a permit. Everybody was using different names because they didn't want us to be there, Fletcher said, adding that Alexander and his allies experimented with a variety of aliases to secure permits for the east front of the Capitol. Laughing, Fletcher recalled how the police reportedly called her, trying to find out who was who. That's so funny. Haha. Back the blue. A Senate report on security failures during the riot, released earlier this month, suggests that at least one Capitol Police intelligence officer had suspicions about this deceptive strategy, but that leadership failed to appreciate it. Yet another example of intelligence breakdowns. On December 31st, the officer sent an email expressing her concerns, the women are doing it right here in this thing, that the permit requests were, quote, being used as proxies for Stop the Steal, and that those requesting permits may also be involved with organizations that may be planning trouble on January 6th. A Capitol Police spokesperson told ProPublica on April 2nd, "Our intelligence suggested one or more groups were affiliated with Stop the Steal after we asked for a copy of the One Nation Under God permit, which they declined to provide." Yet 18 days later, Capitol Police Acting Chief Yogananda Pittman told congressional investigators that she believed the permit requests had been properly vetted and that they were not granted to anyone affiliated with Stop the Steal. Pittman did not respond to ProPublica requests for comment. Last week, a Capitol Police spokesperson told ProPublica the department knew that Stop the Steal and One Nation Under God organizers were likely associated, but added that the police believed denying a permit based on assumed associations would be a First Amendment violation. They have a point there. The department did, however, take the likely association into account when making decisions to enhance its security posture. Kenneth Harrelson, an oath keeper who allegedly ran the far-right group's ground team in D.C., so it's tactical sounding, cool, right? Went to Washington to provide security for Alexander, according to Harrelson's wife. Harrelson has pleaded not guilty to felony charges in connection with the riot and is one of the oath keepers at the center of a major Department of Justice conspiracy case. Harrelson's wife, Angel Harrison, said in an interview with ProPublica that her husband was excited to visit Washington for the first time, especially to provide security for an important person, but that he lost Alexander in the chaos, and that the chaos that consumed the Capitol, and decided to join the crowd inside. A dedicated bodyguard there. He lost his charge and said, well, I might as well go commit some crimes inside the Capitol. All right. Well, he's no angel, even if his wife says that's what her name is. Next up, historic day. As the movement hurtled toward January 6th, it's really hurtled, yes, right? They said it, they spelled it right. I pronounced it wrong. No, I've been watching the U.S. track and field trials on TV, but okay. As the movement hurtled toward January 6th, what started as a loosely united coalition quickly splintered dividing into two competing groups that vied for power and credit. On one side, Alexander and Jones had emerged as a new, more extreme element within the Republican grassroots ecosystem. Their chief opposition was the organization Women for America First, helmed by Kramer and other veterans of the Tea Party movement, itself once viewed as the Republican fringe. That's funny, they've been replaced. But again, same political dynamics over and over again as we were discussing yesterday in the Democratic side of things. Same dynamics here in the Republican side. Okay, Kramer was an early backer of Trump, and her Tea Party work helped get Mark Meadows elected to the House of Representatives in 2012. The schism was rooted in an ideological dispute. Kramer felt Alexander's agenda and tactics were too extreme. Alexander wanted to distinguish Stop the Steal by being more directly confrontational than Kramer's group and their Tea Party. "Our movement is masculine in nature," he said in a live stream. Wow, that's rough and tough. Trump promoted both groups' events online at various times, Stop the Steal through its alias, One Nation Under God, obtained a Capitol Police permit to rally on Capitol grounds, while Kramer and Women for America First controlled the National Park Service permit for a large gathering on the White House Ellipse. Alexander and Jones wanted to speak at the Ellipse rally, but Kramer was opposed. The provocateurs found a powerful ally in Caroline Wren, an elite Republican fundraiser with connections to the Trump family, particularly Donald Trump Jr. and his partner, Kimberly Guilfoyle. Wren, I think, by the way, before I go on with this, I think is now currently like one of the chief spokespeople for the now, banned from social media, Donald Trump. And their post-White House operation. Anyway, Wren had raised money for the Ellipse rally and pushed to get Alexander and Jones on stage, according to 6 people involved in the January 6th rally and emails reviewed by ProPublica. So that would make it even more serious an issue that she's still currently representing Trump as an official spokesperson. If I believe I'm right about that. We'll have to check into that, or if ProPublica doesn't do it for us. Pearson, the Trump campaign official, had initially been asked by Wren to help mediate the conflict, but Pearson shared Kramer's concern that Jones and Alexander were too unpredictable. Oh my God, she's the smart person in this. Pearson and Wren declined to comment. On January 2nd, the fighting became so intense that Pearson asked senior White House officials how she should handle the situation, according to a person familiar with White House communications. The officials agreed that Alexander and Jones should not be on the stage and told Pearson to take charge of the event. Meanwhile, they're in a do not congratulate situation with the president himself. No, keep these guys off the stage. It'll be an embarrassment to the president. And then Trump gets up there and says, "Alex Jones, Alexander, I love you guys. You're the best." The next morning, Trump announced to the world that he would attend the rally at the Ellipse. "I will be there. Historic day," he tweeted. This came as a surprise to both rally organizers and White House staff, each of whom told ProPublica they hadn't been informed that he intended to speak at the rally, and I'm sure they wanted him not to. The same day, a website went live promoting a march on January 6th. It instructed demonstrators to meet at the Ellipse, then march to the Capitol at 1 p.m., to, quote, "let the establishment know we will fight back against this fraudulent election. The fate of our nation depends on it." Alexander and his allies fired off these instructions across social media, while Kramer and her group had held legally permitted marches at previous D.C. rallies and promoted all their events with the hashtag March for Trump. This time, their permit specifically barred them from holding an organized march. Rally organizers were concerned that violating their permit would create legal liability for themselves and pose significant danger to the public, said Stockton, a political consultant with Tea Party roots who spent weeks with Kramer as they held rallies across the country in support of the president. I guess here you might note, maybe you're just not the right claimants to the Tea Party mantle if you're worried about, legal liability and getting everything permitted. I mean, the Boston Tea Party probably had no permit, maybe, but just as well. Anyway, Lawrence and Stockton's fellow organizers contacted Pearson to inform her that the march was unpermitted, according to Stockton and 3 other people familiar with the situation, while ProPublica has independently confirmed that senior White House officials, including Meadows, were involved in the broader effort to limit Alexander's role on January 6th. It remains unclear just how far the rally organizers went to warn officials of their specific fears about the march. Another source present for communications between Amy Kramer and her daughter and fellow organizer Kylie Kramer, whole family gets a piece of this, told ProPublica that on January 3rd, Kylie Kramer called her mother in desperation about the march. Kylie Kramer asked her mom to escalate the situation to higher levels of the White House, and her mother said she would work on it, according to the source, who could hear the conversation on the speakerphone. "You need to call right now," the source remembered the younger Kramer saying. The source said that Kylie Kramer suggested Meadows as a person to contact around that time. The source said that in a subsequent conversation, Amy Kramer told her daughter she would take the matter to Eric Trump's wife, Lara Trump. The source said that Kramer was in frequent contact with Lara Trump at the time. Stockton said that he was not aware of Kramer talking to the family about January 6th, but added that Kramer regularly communicates with the Trump family, including Lara Trump. He also said that Kramer gave him the distinct impression that she had contacted Meadows about the march. Through his advisor, Ben Williamson, Meadows declined to comment on whether the organizers contacted him through the march, regarding the march. Lara Trump, who spoke at the Ellipse on January 6th, did not immediately respond to a voicemail and text message asking for comment or to an inquiry left on her website. Eric Trump did not immediately respond to an emailed request for comment. Kramer did not answer questions from ProPublica about communications with Lara Trump. Donald Trump's press office did not immediately respond to a request for comment either. The White House at the time was scrambling from one crisis to the next. The one day they didn't scramble for anything, January 6th. On January 2nd, Trump and Meadows called Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. We all know about this, right? Trump pressed Raffensperger to find 11,780 votes that would swing the state tally his way. On January 3rd, the president met with Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller and urged him to do what he could to protect Trump's supporters on the 6th. By the way, in all this find the 11,780 votes thing, I'd just like to note for the record that as far as Trump was concerned, winning Georgia by 1 vote was legit and enough for him to claim victory, well, certainly in Georgia. And I mean, I guess like technically if you count the votes, I guess the person who gets the most votes wins. It's just interesting that he never said, I should really be winning this thing overwhelmingly. And I guess that was probably, I'm sure he would much rather have said, well, if you can find it, if you're going to quote unquote find something, find 100,000 votes. But I guess he was trying to minimize the ask from Raffensperger. I'm not asking you for much. I'm not asking you for 100,000 votes. I'm only asking for 11,780. But it's interesting. Don't you think it would be even more suspicious if he suddenly won by 1 vote when he was claiming to have won overwhelmingly and everybody knew it? I'm just curious, just a thought. Anyway, meanwhile, in all of this, Wren, the Republican fundraiser, was continuing to advocate for Jones and Alexander to play a prominent role at the Ellipse rally, according to emails and multiple sources. Oh yes, right. I don't know, did I read this and just not give it the attention it deserved? Right at the end of the paragraph in which you were first referring back to Raffensperger having to find the votes, that on January 3rd, the next day after that call, the president met with Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller. I did mention this, but I need to stress this. Urged Miller to do what he could to use the military, I guess. This is the Secretary of Defense. I want you to do what you can to protect Trump's supporters on the 6th. In other words, not only were we looking at a situation where he was saying, well, don't send the National Guard to protect the Capitol. If you send troops at all, send them to protect my people so that they win the insurrection. He was looking there for enlisting military help in his coup and just didn't get it. Or at least not the kind of help he thought he was going to get. Meanwhile, Wren, the Republican fundraiser, right, trying to get Alex Jones and Ali Alexander to play a prominent role at the Ellipse rally. A senior White House official suggested to Pearson that she resolved the dispute by going to the president himself, according to a source familiar with the matter. On January 4th, Pearson met with Trump in the Oval Office. Trump expressed surprise that other people wanted to speak at the Ellipse at all. His request for the day was simple. He wanted lots of music and to limit the speakers to himself, maybe some family members and a few others, according to the source and emails reviewed by ProPublica. I'd believe that in a minute. The president asked if there was another venue where people like Alexander and Roger Stone could speak. Could there be another place? Let the stupid little people do this junk. I want just music and the chance to go on for hours. Pearson assured him that there was another venue, I guess. She informed the president that there was another rally scheduled the night before the election certification where those who lost their opportunity to speak at the Ellipse could still do so. It was meant as an olive branch extended between the competing factions, according to Stockton and two other sources. Chafian, a Reiki practitioner, who'd been working closely with Alex Jones, was put in charge of the evening portion of the January 5th event. And am I even sure what we're talking about when I say, and did I pronounce it right? Reiki practitioner? How is that relevant to anything? Does that strike anybody as obvious? I actually might have to look this up to be sure. What am I looking at here? A healing technique based on the principle that the therapist can channel energy into the patient by means of touch to activate the natural healing process of the patient's body and restore physical and emotional well-being. Seems a little lefty, quite honestly, for somebody like this, and also kind of irrelevant. It's just, I don't know, odd, maybe just a surprising element to us. All right, the speakers for January 5th then included Jones, Alexander, Stone, Michael Flynn, and 3%er militia member Jeremy Liggett, who wore a flak jacket and led a F Antifa chant. Very exciting material he prepared for that. Liggett is now, by the way, running for Congress, and don't put it past them to put him in there, given that there are already QAnon assassins in the building as it stands. Chafian had invited Proud Boys leader Tarrio to speak as well, but Tarrio was arrested the day before on charges that he had brought prohibited gun magazines to Washington and burned a Black Lives Matter banner stolen from a church because of what a great American he is. Tarrio told ProPublica that he did not know the flag was taken from a church and that the gun magazines were a custom engraved gift for a friend. Okay. He has pleaded not guilty to a misdemeanor charge of property destruction. The gun magazine charge is still pending as an indictment before a grand jury. Thank you, Proud Boys, Chafian shouted at the end of her speech. The Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the 3%ers, all of those guys keep you safe. Quite the opposite, of course, but that was the rhetoric from the stage that night. Wren, however, would not back down. On the morning of January 6th, she arrived at the Ellipse before dawn and began arranging the seats. Jones and Alexander moved toward the front. Organizers were so worried that Jones and Alexander might try to rush the stage where the president was going to be, that Pearson contacted a senior White House official to see how aggressive she should get in her efforts to contain Wren. Then, by the way, they lost the White House, left, went down to Pervalago, and hired Wren. Just saying. After discussing several options, the officials suggested she call the United States Park Police and have Wren escorted off the premises. Pearson relayed this to Kylie Kramer, who contacted the police. Officers arrived, but ultimately took no action. By 9 a.m., Trump supporters, now this is the White House people, the people sanctioned by the White House and Trump, have called the police and said, we'd like to get rid of these extremists. But I guess somebody wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and nothing happens. That's an odd development. By 9 a.m., Trump supporters had arrived in droves, nuns and bikers, men in American flag suits. I wonder whether they were real nuns. A line of Oath Keepers. Signs welcomed the crowd with the words, Save America, March. Kylie Kramer greeted them gleefully. What's up, deplorables? She said from the stage. Wren escorted Jones and Alexander out of the event early as they prepared to lead their march on the Capitol. Didn't escort them out of the event to ban them. She escorted them out of the event to set up the next one. At 11:57 a.m., Trump got on stage and, after a rambling speech, gave his now infamous directive, "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong," he said. "I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." Lawrence, Dustin Stockton's fiance and co-organizer, remember that woman, remembers her shock. By the way, this is a match made in heaven, by the way. Dustin Stockton's fiance, she curses like a sailor. Maybe she is a sailor. That's really interesting. Her quote is, "What the F is this MFer talking about?" It's the president she's talking about, by the way. Lawrence, an ardent Trump supporter, said of the former president. That's pretty funny. I mean, that's what I usually say about the former president. And I said it when he was president, too. In the coming hours, an angry mob would force its way into the building. Protesters smashed windows with riot shields stolen from cops, ransacked House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's chambers, and inflicted an estimated $1.5 million worth of damage. Roughly 140 police officers were injured. One was stabbed with a metal fence stake, and another had spinal discs smashed, according to union officials. The Stop the Steal group chat shows a reckoning with these events in real time. "They stormed the Capitol," wrote Stop the Steal National Coordinator Michael Cordray in a text message at 2:33 p.m. "Our event is on delay." "I'm at the Capitol and I just joined the breach," texted Straka, that wasn't smart, who months earlier had raised concerns about allying with white nationalists. "I got gassed. I never felt so effing alive in my life." Wow. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Looks like we're actually reaching the end, finally, of this ProPublica piece. Interesting as it is, I would like to get to a couple other of the big stories, and we'll see how that goes. So where were we here? It was Straka texting, how he never felt more alive in his life now that he's been gassed at the Capitol. Alexander and Cordray, or Coudry, Coudrey, and there's no first R in that. Alexander and Coudry advised the group to leave. "Everyone get out of there," Alexander wrote. "The FBI is coming hunting." Except now I guess they all believe that the FBI were the people who actually broke into the Capitol. Get it? It's all makes so much sense. Anyway, in the months since, the Department of Justice has charged more than 400 people for their actions at the Capitol, including more than 20 alleged Proud Boys, over a dozen alleged Oath Keepers, and Straka, who texted, "I did it." It's unclear from court records whether Straka has yet entered a plea. I think the plea is guilty. I just texted that I did it. In emails to ProPublica, Codry declined to answer questions about Stop the Steal. "I just really don't care about politics anymore," he said. "It's boring." But that's not the one running for Congress, is it? I've lost track. That seems like an odd thing to say. Probably not the same guy. Meadows, now a senior partner at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Did I read that right? That's the name of the group, is the Conservative Partnership Institute. I mean, it's a fine name. It's, anodyne. Doesn't mean anything in particular, but it's just interesting. I'm a senior partner at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Oh, really? You're a partner at the Partnership Institute, eh? What do you guys do? Well, you partner on things, just... Well, are you a senior partner or a junior partner? There are no junior partners at the Conservative Partnership Institute. That's our motto. Oh my gosh, I got to get one of these jobs. All right, well anyway, it's a think tank supposedly in Washington. Mostly they think about partnering, I guess. And he appeared on Fox News on January 27th, delivering one of the first public remarks on the riot from a former Trump White House official. He encouraged the GOP to, quote, get on, not move on, but get on from January 6th and focus on, quote, what's important to the American people. And of course, he encourages that focus because he is criminally indictable in all of this if you actually stop and look at it. Neither Meadows nor anyone else who worked in the Trump White House at the time has had to answer any questions as part of the various inquiries currently proceeding in Congress. Alexander has kept a low profile since January 6th. He's actually been a fugitive, I think. But in private, texts show he has encouraged his allies to prepare for, quote, civil war. Just arrest him already. Don't denounce anything, he messaged his inner circle in January regarding the Capitol riot. You don't want to be on the opposite side of freedom fighters in the coming conflict. Veterans will be looking for civilian political leaders. In other words, him, I guess. All the people who do the fighting and shooting are going to need leaders. And I propose myself for that because I text stuff. Anyway, but interestingly, too, is don't denounce anything, right? You don't want to end up on the wrong side of the freedom fighters. But what were Alexander's texts at the moment of the breach of the Capitol? It was, everyone get out of there. The FBI is coming. And I don't know, is that like more like, well, don't get out of there because it's the right thing to do to get out of there. You shouldn't be in there in the first place. But rather, you don't want to get caught by the FBI. Even though I now pretend that I believe that the FBI was the ones who were in there. And that doesn't make any sense. But logic never, stopped any of these guys. But interesting. Don't denounce anything. You don't want a text record of your wavering on the issue. Except my text record shows me wavering on the issue. So anyway, I guess that makes him a perfect civilian political leader for this group. All right, like I said, the other major story circulating this morning is that from the New York Times, which tells a similar tale, except it doesn't really involve, it doesn't culminate in storming of the Capitol, but just another tale of political subterfuge that I guess I would say infects the entirety of the political right, except that it's not like a subsidiary or ancillary infection. It's the main political ideology. Lie about what you're doing, hide it, and if you're questioned about it, say, I'm hiding for transparency. I'm lying for truth, you see. Everyone knows that it's rough stuff, this lying and hiding, but I'm doing it for noble purposes. That's the Project Veritas motto. What's the deal here? They seemed like Democratic activists. They were secretly conservative spies. Subheader reading, operatives infiltrated progressive groups across the West to try to manipulate politics and reshape the national electoral map. They targeted moderate Republicans, too. Anyone seen as threats to hardline conservatives, i.e., they adopted the Russian agenda and tactics both, but did so in the name of America. Just as they were lying for truth and hiding for transparency, they were America firsting for Russia, I would say. I mean, I don't think the actual accusation here is that they were Russian operatives. It's just that they were using the Russian playbook. Just coincidentally, who knows where they might have picked it up from. The reporting here is by Mark Mazzetti and Adam Goldman. Again, New York Times. Dateline for this story begins with Cheyenne, Wyoming. Exactly where you would go hunting for Democrats. I guess if you're in Wyoming and you're limiting yourself to the state, where will you find the Democrats? Cheyenne's a good bet, I suppose. Anything passing for a large city in Wyoming might be your best shot. But anyway, that's the Dateline. The young couple posing in front of the faux Eiffel Tower at the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas, which isn't in Cheyenne, Wyoming, fit right in. Two people in a sea of idealistic Democrats who had arrived in the city in February of 2020 for a Democratic primary debate. Large donations to the Democratic National Committee, $10,000 each, had bought Bo Meyer and Sophia LaRocca tickets to the debate, which is problematic in its own right, but there it is. During a cocktail reception beforehand, they worked the room of party officials, rainbow donkey pins affixed to their lapels. In fact, much about them was a lie. Mr. Meyer and Ms. LaRocca were part of an undercover operation by conservatives to infiltrate progressive groups, political campaigns, and the offices of Democratic as well as moderate Republican elected officials during the 2020 election cycle. According to interviews and documents, Using large campaign donations and cover stories, the operatives aimed to gather dirt that could sabotage the reputation of people and organizations considered threats to a hard right agenda advanced by President Donald J. Trump. At the center of the scheme was an unusual cast: a former British spy connected to the security contractor Eric Prince, a wealthy heiress to the Gore-Tex fortune, and undercover operatives like Mr. Meyer and Ms. LaRocca, who used Wyoming as a base to insinuate themselves into the political fabric of this state and at least two others, Colorado and Arizona. And again, here I would say, infiltrating the Wyoming Democratic Party, probably not that challenging, which might be why they selected it, but also not that effective, because Wyoming Democratic Party isn't, really considered like a powerhouse in national politics or in Wyoming politics for the most part. Colorado, maybe. Arizona, arguably, yes, but certainly more so than Wyoming. But I don't know. That's what they did. They didn't want to travel very far. All right. In more than 24 interviews and a review of federal election records, the New York Times reconstructed more of that. Many of the operatives' interactions in Wyoming and other states, mapping out their associations and likely targets. There's not that many people in Wyoming. And spoke to people with whom they discussed details of their spying operation. Publicly available documents in Wyoming also tied Mr. Meyer and Ms. LaRocca to an address in Cody used by the former spy Richard Seddon. And I guess I remember reading some mentions earlier, prior shows, about Eric Prince working with, trying to help Project Veritas and James O'Keefe get people trained in spycraft because I guess his own training in spycraft was so stupid. And I remember it basically entails dressing up like a pimp and marching around outside of an Acorn office and putting on an Osama bin Laden mask and wading around in the shallows of the Rio Grande. So they needed an upgrade. And I guess this is what they got. What the effort accomplished and how much information Mr. Seddon's operatives gathered is unclear. Sometimes their tactics were bumbling and amateurish, like when they decided to strike at the heart of the Democratic operation by going to Wyoming, for instance. But the operation's use of spycraft to manipulate the politics of several states over years greatly exceeds the tactics of more traditional political dirty tricks operations. And I guess that's why it is of some interest. Once again, my comment on this morning, just again, both of these things are stories about how, like, traditional, having a politics for these guys can't be just a straight up contest of ideas. It's got to involve subterfuge, stealing, lying, cheating, spying, killing in some instances. And I guess that explains it. I mean, the party whose whole approach to everything is voter suppression, voter fraud, and the big lie, and when necessary, when none of that works or not to their satisfaction or isn't enough fun, armed insurrection and insurgency as well. So, I guess we should probably make a bipartisan deal with them about infrastructure, don't you? Anyway. So their use of spycraft, etc., bad sign. Also a sign of how ultra-conservative Republicans see a deep need to install allies in various positions at the state level to gain an advantage on the electoral map. Secretaries of State, for example, play a crucial role in certifying election results every 2 years. And some become targets of Mr. Trump and his allies in their efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The campaign followed another effort engineered by Mr. Seddon. He aided a network of conservative activists trying to discredit perceived enemies of Mr. Trump inside the government, including a planned sting operation in 2018 against Trump's national security advisor at the time, one of 500 he's had, H.R. McMaster, and helping set up secret surveillance of FBI employees and other government officials. Again, mostly nothing comes of those, but they were basically trying to get recordings of them saying bad things about Mr. Trump so that they could say, look, they're internally biased and it's the deep state, etc., etc. Mr. Prince had set Mr. Seddon's work in motion, recruiting him around the beginning of the Trump administration to hire former spies to train conservative activists in the basics of espionage and send them on political sabotage missions. By the end of 2018, Mr. Seddon secured funding from the Wyoming heiress, and I guess that's why they were there, the Wyoming heiress Susan Gore. According to people familiar with her role, he recruited several former operatives from the conservative group Project Veritas, where he had worked previously, to set up the political infiltration operations in the West. Project Veritas has a history of using operatives with fake names to target liberal organizations and make secret recordings to embarrass them. The endeavor in the West appears to have had two primary goals: penetrate local and eventually national Democratic political circles for long-term intelligence gathering, and collect dirt on moderate Republicans that could be used against them in the internecine party battles being waged by Trump and his allies. Nate Martin, the head of Better Wyoming, a progressive group that was one of the operation's targets, said he suspected that its aim was to dig up this information and you sit on it until you can really destroy somebody. Toward the first goal, operatives concocted cover stories and made large campaign contributions to gain entry into Democratic events, such as the Las Vegas debate and a Washington fundraiser attended by Democratic lawmakers. They also took aim at the administration of the Republican governor of Wyoming, Mark Gordon, whom hard-right conservatives considered far too moderate and whose candidacy Ms. Gore had opposed in 2018. They targeted a Republican state representative, now the Wyoming Speaker of the House, because of his openness to liberalizing marijuana laws, a position Ms. Gore vigorously opposes. That's interesting because there's a significant contingent among Republican activists that surprisingly are the opposite about that. Anyway, using her Democratic cover identity, Ms. LaRocca got a job working for a consortium of wealthy liberal donors in Wyoming, the Wyoming Investor Network, or WIN, W-I-N, that had decided to back some moderate Republicans, because there aren't enough Democrats in Wyoming to back. The job gave her access to valuable information. Getting the WIN stuff is really damaging, said Chris Bell, who worked as a political consultant for the consortium. It's the entire strategy, where the money is going, what we're doing long term. Mr. Seddon, Mr. Meyer, and Ms. LaRocca did not respond to requests for comment about the operation or the campaign contributions. Cassie Craven, a lawyer for Ms. Gore, that's an interesting lawyer's name, Craven, a lawyer for Ms. Gore also did not respond to emails or a voicemail message seeking comment, nor did Ms. Gore herself. When the Times reached out to political activists and politicians who had come to know Mr. Meyer and Ms. LaRocca, informing them of the couple's true agenda, some said the news confirmed their own suspicions that the pair might not have been on the level, which means that they were great spies. Others were stunned and said they regretted any part they had played in helping them gain entree into political circles in the West. George Durazo Jr., a Colorado businessman and fundraiser who coaxed the large donations from Mr. Meyer and Ms. LaRocca and shepherded them around Las Vegas before the debate, said he was both angry and embarrassed. I wouldn't be. You got money out of them. What's your job? He had planned, he said, to take them to the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee before the pandemic turned it into a virtual event. If they are indeed Benedict Arnold and Mata Hari, he said, I was the one who was fooled. But to what end, really? Next, Ms. LaRocca first met Mr. Seddon in 2017, as they're setting up in Wyoming, when he ran a training for Project Veritas operatives at Mr. Prince's family ranch in Wapiti, Wyoming. I don't know if I've pronounced that correct, but moving on, Mr. Seddon taught them how to work undercover, but not very well, build aliases and recruit sources. I mean, really, I'm sure there's some craft to it and everything, but it's like, why don't you just, tell people you're liberal instead of conservative and then offer them a bunch of money? That's a good plan. Mr. Prince, who had recruited Mr. Seddon, is the brother, of course, of Betsy DeVos, Trump's education secretary, but he's got his own history. founder of Blackwater, of course, secret meeting in Seychelles with Middle East officials and prior to the inauguration of Trump back in 2016, the whole works. Mr. Meyer, or 17 for the inauguration anyway. Mr. Meyer, 36, a brawny and tattooed veteran of the Army's 82nd Airborne Division who fought in Iraq, also trained at the Prince Ranch that year. His mother is a baker and was the cook at the ranch, and he's the nephew of Glenn Beck, the conservative commentator. So it was going to be super easy for him to pose as a liberal, I guess. Anyway, at one point, Ms. Gore came to watch the training at the ranch, which is also interesting. Come to watch the training. Again, the training is how to work undercover and pretend you're somebody else. And so, you sit in a room and say, here's what you do. You lie about who you are, pretend to be someone else. But remember, not to tell them that you're actually this other person. Oh, I'm going to come to Wyoming and watch. Oh, she was already in Wyoming. So she dropped by to watch one guy tell another guy, tell them your name is something else, or tell them you're somebody different. Okay. Duly noted. The next year, this took a year, Mr. Meyer and Ms. LaRocca lived in a luxury house in the Georgetown neighborhood of Washington that Project Veritas rented for undercover sting operations against government officials that tried to expose deep state bias against Mr. Trump. I guess they rented a house, and they were going to use it, remember, to try and entrap H.R. McMaster into embarrassing himself. But I guess that came to nothing, and they said, we got to use the house for something. Let's try it for this. People who worked for the conservative group identified the couple and linked them to the Georgetown house. Others confirmed Ms. LaRocca was pictured on the website Project Veritas Exposed, where she was identified as Maria. Mr. Seddon left Project Veritas in the summer of 2018. He lured Mr. Meyer, Ms. LaRocca, and others to work with him in Wyoming on a new venture, one that would more closely model his time, as a British intelligence officer working overseas. Mr. Seddon wanted to run a classic espionage operation in which undercover agents would burrow into organizations and potentially recruit others to help collect information. In his days at MI6, the goal was to spy on potential adversaries or targets without getting caught. And then, that's a good plan, and then quietly use the information to gain an advantage. If conducted correctly, I guess this one hasn't been because we're reading about it in a newspaper, such operations can last for years. They just have to do something, that's all. And he found someone to pay for it. Ms. Gore, the Gore-Tex heiress, who for years had supported conservative and libertarian causes. Hints of Mr. Seddon's project surfaced recently in a memoir by Cassandra Spencer, a one-time Project Veritas operative. In the book, she describes being called in June 2018 by an associate of her former colleague, Richard, who was trying to secure funding for a new initiative. Richard, what's your new initiative? I don't know, which is the thing. The man, whom she calls Ken, told her it was a pay-for-play operation where clients would put up money for an undercover effort. I don't even know if they're using the terms correctly here, but Ms. LaRocca, 28, first approached the Wyoming Democratic Party in January of 2019, fresh off her attendance at the Women's March in Cheyenne, with an offer to help raise money. Her goal, she told people, was ambitious: help flip one of America's most conservative states into a reliable victory for Democratic presidential candidates, as Colorado had become over the past 2 decades. Really, Wyoming. Okay. Mr. Seddon appears to have directed Ms. LaRocca's outreach to the Wyoming Democratic Party as a safe first step toward building up her bona fides for future operations. Democrats in the state are vastly outnumbered, have little political clout, and are eager for volunteers, but also, that means unlikely to flip anything. Ms. LaRocca quickly declared her candidacy for vice chairwoman of the Wyoming Young Democrats, obtained a contract position at the party as a fundraiser paid by commission, and had meetings with the state party's 2 top officials, Joe Barbuto and Sarah Hunt. Her behavior raised some suspicion because she was a bad spy. Ms. LaRocca and Mr. Meyer lived in Fort Collins, Colorado, only about 45 miles from Cheyenne, which is Wyoming's capital, but their residence prompted some Democrats to ask how they planned to organize a grassroots campaign to flip the state while living in another one, right? Colorado. Ms. LaRocca told others she could not rent a home in Cheyenne because she had a dog. An implausible explanation. It does seem awfully implausible. It doesn't really strike me as something that would not prompt a lot of questions, but I guess the people were just like, okay, something wrong with that lady. Yeah, I can't rent a home in Cheyenne because I have a dog. I mean, that wouldn't necessarily give you away as a conservative. It might give you away as an alien squid in a human skin, but, that just might mean you're a Mitt Romney operative. Anyway, Ms. LaRocca had also introduced herself to party officials as Cat DeBro. That seems like a great idea. She eventually told a story about why she later went by the name Sophia LaRocca. I guess is that as cover. My real name is Cat DeBro. Okay, well, how come you told us all your name was Sophia LaRocca? Is that what she's trying to say? Well, you see, I've been the victim of an online stalker, she said, but decided to once again use her original name because the police had told her that her stalker had reformed. And also, don't worry about it, he can't come into the state because he has a dog. I don't know what kind of story is this? I mean, basically what this means is that Seddon is an idiot and can't train anybody about anything. Or maybe he's great and these two are morons. I don't know which ones. Maybe it's both. Her story from the start rang very untrue, said Nina Hebert. Hebert, maybe she's Cajun. I don't know. But anyway, she was at the time the digital director for the Wyoming Democratic Party. The police don't call you and say, hey, your stalker is better. That's right. That's probably true. Ms. Hebert, we'll call her, said she began to restrict Ms. LaRocca's access to the party's email system in the summer of 2019. At the same time, Ms. Meyer was making connections of her own around the state. I'm sorry, Mr. Meyer. Well, I misgendered him. That's bad news. Making connections of his own around the state, meeting with Democrats and Republicans on the issue of the medicinal use of marijuana, which he said was particularly valuable for war veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Was that him pretending to be liberal? Is that what this is? Okay. In August of 2019, the couple volunteered at a Democratic Party fundraiser at the Old Wilson Schoolhouse, a community center in the shadow of the Teton Mountain Range near Jackson. Ms. LaRocca had her picture taken with the event's headline guest, Tom Perez, the former Labor Secretary and then chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Scandal ensues. Months later, Ms. LaRocca secured a spot in a program training young progressives in the state on the basics of political and community organizing. She dashed off an email to Mr. Martin, the head of the group running the program, saying how thrilled she was to be receiving the training. That'll give you away. During the course, she paired up with Marcy Kindred, who ran unsuccessfully for a seat in the Wyoming legislature. Ms. LaRocca later gave $250 to her campaign. Ms. LaRocca used a picture they took together for her Facebook profile. Okay, and there it is. It was kind of odd that she put it on Facebook, Ms. Kindred said. We weren't really that close. Now it makes total sense. She was playing the long game, but not very well, trying to be my friend in the hopes of me getting into the legislature. Ms. LaRocca also told Ms. Kindred that she wanted to work on the campaign of Carly Provenza, a police reform advocate who ultimately won a seat in the legislature in one of the few Democratic districts in the state, or one of a few. Anyway, she and Mr. Meyer eventually began going on double dates with Ms. Provenza and Mr. Martin, the head of Better Wyoming, who was then her fiancé and is now her husband. Over dinner one night at Sushi Jeju, I'm guessing, in Fort Collins, Ms. LaRocca and Mr. Meyer made a big announcement. They, too, were engaged. Ms. LaRocca flashed a large diamond ring. Mr. Meyer paid for dinner. But the relationship began taking strange turns. Months later, meeting with Ms. Provenza and Mr. Martin in Laramie, Mr. Meyer told them to turn off their phones. That won't raise any suspicions. He then proposed a plan to target Republicans, using some of his contacts who could befriend politicians and dig up dirt on them. Mr. Meyer said he had friends in military intelligence, which is cool and tactical, who could run background checks on people, and suggested that he had been on a kill squad while serving in Iraq. That might hurt you with the progressive folks. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I got to tell you, as I read on through this, this is a very interesting story in its own right. But as I read through it, it essentially seems to me like this is just a tale that leads nowhere. I don't think they ever accomplish anything, and not too much I can tell you. I mean, there's more to the story, and so it's entirely possible that there's some big breakthrough in all this, but I don't think so. And essentially these two just dither around doing nothing and, potentially befriend people who might potentially give them information. But again, the information ends up being about the Wyoming Democratic Party. And there's really just not a hell of a lot that you can do with that information. I mean, even if you seized operational control of the Wyoming Democratic Party, what are you going to do? I'm sure they had dreams of, if I'm the chair of the Wyoming Democratic Party, I'll be invited to the Democratic National Convention and I can move into national Democratic politics. So they figured they were biding their time to move into. But, so many other states from which you could have so much more influence. But, I don't know. Wyoming was where they were. So there's not too much more. There's more to the article, but I'm thinking that maybe it's time to move on to other topics, other subjects and stories, just because these guys just end up floating around making some people suspicious but not others, and in the end donating a bunch of money to Democratic politicians and not getting anywhere with any of it. So actually great, pretty cool. As a matter of fact, I saw David Frum tweeting about this story earlier, and he had some interesting observations on it. One being, of course, that Dinesh D'Souza got a 5-year prison sentence for organizing straw donations like those at the center of this reported scheme. And then he went on to offer an interesting description of basically what's going on with this and so many more Republican schemes. That's kind of why I liked reading this alongside the story of the organization of the January 6th thing, and everybody's deceiving or thinking they're deceiving lots of people by hiding behind aliases and applying for permits as fake groups, etc. And Frum just sort of outlines this is the general Republican plan, I guess. And he would have been in a position to know about a lot of these too, as a Republican himself. But step one, concoct wild fantasies about your political opponents. That is, remember that all these people are saying, well, it's okay for us to lie, cheat, and steal in the name of honesty, transparency, and truth, because the other guys are the ones lying, cheating, and stealing. So we're going to use lying, cheating, and stealing as tactics against their lying, cheating, and stealing, and then expose it. And curiously, all of these plans come to nothing in the end. I will say they did score the victory on Acorn, which, is surprising on a number of levels. But after that, it's just been a series of embarrassments and arrests for Project Veritas and their ilk. And then these guys train over a years-long mission to take over the Democratic Party from Wyoming. And by the way, the very end of the story, the very last item in the story, just in case you were wondering what happens with all this. Last week, Ms. LaRocca and Mr. Meyer married in Bighorn, Wyoming. Mr. Beck, the conservative commentator, and Mr. Meyer's uncle delivered a wedding toast. Just thought I'd throw that in there. By the way, no word on how they explain having the wedding in Wyoming, even though they have dogs. You know, just one of the loose ends that isn't really tied up in all of that. But of course, before they got married, I guess this is the part that's supposed to make it kind of intriguing. That Mr. Meyer and Mr. LaRocca often told her colleagues, that they were committed to upending the political dynamics in the Mountain West, saying that even a deeply conservative state like Wyoming could eventually turn liberal. My plan for that, by the way, and a lot of other people have shared the same plan, is just move a lot of, liberals there. There's very few people in Wyoming. And if you moved, 100,000 liberals, committed, Democrats to Wyoming, you could probably change the politics of the state entirely. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. They were going to do this. They were going to turn everything around. LaRocca said she wanted to continue working with the Wyoming Investor Network. But then, right before the November election, Meyer and LaRocca disappeared. On October 21st, she wrote an email to her boss saying that she had to leave the country. I have a family emergency and I'm going to Venezuela as my grandmother is gravely ill, she wrote. Others she had worked with and befriended over the 2 years say they hadn't heard from her in months. Or they haven't heard from her in months. She kind of dropped off the face of the earth. They lost the election, and, I guess there was nothing interesting left for them. But anyway, it turns out they came back. They got married in Wyoming. Glenn Beck went to the wedding, gave a toast, and nobody knows what happened to the fake dog. The end. I mean, that's basically it. But as I was going to read you, David Frum describing what motivates a lot of this is, one, that they've concocted wild fantasies about their political opponents. And step two is devise crazy schemes in response to your own fantasies. That's a very important part of what they do, right? Stop the steal, or all the people who say there's massive voter fraud going on the Democratic side, so I'm therefore justified, for instance, in forging my dead father's signature on his absentee ballot and casting it, because I know he wanted to vote for Trump, but he died before he was allowed to vote. Step three, commit major felonies to advance your crazy schemes. And step four, feel supremely sorry for yourself after you are indicted for your felonies. That's kind of the way most of this stuff is developing, but nobody's indicted these two yet. But he goes on to say, that's the story of Project Veritas, but also of the January 6th attacks, also of those recurring incidents of Republicans arrested for voter fraud, and also so much else. And yeah, that's kind of true, and I guess worth noting. All right, other things worth noting we'll try and cram in for the final segment of the day. Let's see. Yes. Oh, I guess I should also note, given the first two stories, I'll distract myself one more time with this from The Hill. The headline it caught my eye anyway. DHS officials told lawmakers there's concern about Trump's August reinstatement conspiracy theory. I mean, it's a dumb thing and all that, but what are the worries? I'm kind of curious about that. The Department of Homeland Security officially told members of Congress on Wednesday there's concern about this stuff. According to Politico's reporting, I'll just read the Hill's summary of it. Sources familiar with the exchange said top DHS counterterrorism official John Cohen shared these concerns while speaking in a members-only briefing in the House Homeland Security Committee. Representative Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan reportedly asked Cohen how DHS is monitoring the spread of disinformation and conspiracy, as well as how they fuel violence, specifically pointing to the Trump reinstatement conspiracy theory that's become popular among QAnon followers. According to Politico's sources, Cohen said that DHS had not found anything linking violence to the conspiracy theory that Trump will be reinstated, though they did say the department was following online discussions in extremist communities. So is the connection that there's no connection? That's great. Cohen said that DHS was highly concerned about the conspiracy theory. However, as it fuels the narrative that the election was rigged, which could in turn spark violence among extremists. So, all right, well, then I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a great deal of concern going on, but just generally monitoring conspiracy theories. All right. I don't know. If it struck you as different, let me know. But I'll include that for you. You can read the article yourself and determine what you think is going on here. Let's see. Other stories I needed to share with you here. I guess since we're out in the Mountain West, a lot of people circulating this story, including Shannon Watts circulating this story of a mass shooting that we forgot to take note of from earlier in the week. Monday in Arvada, is that right? Arvada, Colorado. A Good Samaritan who died in the Arvada shooting was shot by police, according to sources. So just to decode that headline for you, shooting incident in Old Town Arvada, in which a shooter shoots and kills a police officer, and a good guy with a gun, John Hurley, said that realized that what was going on, drew his own pistol, and I guess took a shot at the shooter, at which point other cops arrived on the scene, saw a dude with a gun, and shot and killed him. And it took him a couple days to straighten this out, but I guess that's the word, that good guy with a gun who witnessed the shooting decided to intervene, and when the police arrived, he was visible as guy with gun in hand. And of course, they'd been called to the scene for an officer shot, and this officer who shot him was probably super excited to have identified the shooter and taken him out, only to find out later, he actually took out the good guy with the gun who was supposedly stopping the shooting. So I don't know what to tell you. Things are really crazy when gunfire breaks out in real life, and the fantasy that you'll be able to come away from this unscathed, probably just not a great idea. And you should drop the whole thing. But okay, there you go. I just wanted to share that one with you. Other stories from this morning or from the last couple of days. Let me see. I got to scroll back down here. I know I had something I've been saving in pocket for a couple of days if I can find it, that Patrick Snyder forwarded to us actually last weekend. So it's been waiting around all this time. And I thought this was really kind of interesting. He just shared this tweet that said, here's an excellent thread on the reaction against the new Juneteenth federal holiday. So, we're a week past that, but it's something to think about this weekend, I think. And he actually pointed me to a tweet that's in the middle of this excellent thread, and I would like to start from the beginning because it's just, informative and draws on a lot of history and international happenings as well, international parallels, I guess. And it is from historian Thomas Zimmer, who I believe we read one of his threads not that long ago. It might have been something else that Patrick pointed us to. But he begins here. Last week, in the rush into the Juneteenth holiday, and how exciting it was that they managed to establish it as a federal holiday and celebrate it within days. And we were watching conservative reaction to it, which was kind of amazing and weird because, as people point out, like, for instance, Zimmer's thread begins with Jamel Bouie's tweet that says, I'm kind of amazed that these folks are passing up an opportunity to do the Republicans freed the slaves, Democrats are the party of slavery bit, pointing in turn to Charlie Kirk's tweeting, which says, making Juneteenth a federal holiday isn't about emancipation of slaves. If it was, they would make September 22nd, Emancipation Proclamation Day, a federal holiday. This is about replacing July 4th, just like the 1619 Project is about replacing 1776. Conservatives must reject this. Of course, it's not about that. But it might also be like, maybe it might be, well, I mean, they would reject this, of course. There's no way you can convince Charlie Kirk that this is a good idea. But for anybody on our side who might be confused, well, why isn't Emancipation Proclamation Day a federal holiday? Why Juneteenth instead? I mean, I guess, a good answer. Well, there's several practical answers. One of which is, the timing is very good for a June holiday. Although I guess we could probably use a September holiday as well. So it's not and it was never the strongest argument. But how about maybe center the people who actually celebrate the holiday most enthusiastically and have the best reason to do so, and let them tell you when they want the holiday to be. Right? I think probably African Americans might be, consulted in all of this, and maybe the holiday should be about how they view it and how they celebrate it, as opposed to White Savior Day, Emancipation Proclamation. It's all about Lincoln. I know that would please Charlie Kirk and that would please Republicans, and there's good reason to celebrate Emancipation Proclamation Day, but, we've learned over the years in our study of history that it wasn't necessarily the purest of motives behind it. And, I don't think anybody questions the purity of the excitement people felt about being freed from slavery and finally having that opportunity, whether it was because they got the news or because the guns arrived to make the news effective. And, look, you know what? Why don't you pick the day instead of diaper boy Charlie Kirk over here? Anyway, but he goes on to say, Lincoln knew America's founding was on July 4th, 1776. I mean, John Adams differed, but whatever. He knew this was the day our amazing nation made a step from ideal to reality. Juneteenth, though, is an affront to the unity of July 4th. We now have 2 summer holidays. And one of them based on race. Shame on the GOP for supporting this, says this idiot. Well, Thomas Zimmer, who makes more sense, considerably more sense than Charlie Kirk, has this to follow up with, this example. There are interesting parallels, he says, between the reaction of American conservatives to Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday and the way West German conservatives despised the idea of celebrating May 8th as a day of liberation through much of the post-war period. And here are some thoughts, and they are interesting ones. Why Germany? Well, another interesting comparison between the American far right and Germans, for some reason, but there's a real reason behind it. May 8th. Why May 8th? Well, May 8th, 1945 was, of course, the day Nazi Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allies. It is, or at least was anyway, widely celebrated in many countries, including the U.S. We've sort of forgotten about VE Day. We haven't really done that in a while. Victory in Europe Day, in case you've never actually heard of it, if you're a millennial or something like that. Don't blame it on millennials. But anyway, it was celebrated in one, at least, of the 2 post-war Germanys. Which one, by the way? Well, the German Democratic Republic. Remember them? That's East Germany, which was part of the Eastern Bloc and defined its identity in discontinuity with Prussian and Nazi history, because they were, of course, Eastern Bloc, and explicitly, though inadequately, as a society of anti-fascists. Of course, they were communists, but they were, in fact, anti-fascists. And I guess, you'll only find the successors to, what's his name, Jonah Goldberg, saying, see, they were anti-fascists or communists originally, and they've never given that up. Whatever. Anyway, that's not the important part. Based on this officially imposed state identity in East Germany, right, the day was celebrated as the Day of Liberation of the German People from Hitler Fascism. That's the, I guess, literal translation of the German name for the day, and you're not going to get me to try to pronounce that. The situation was very different, though, in West Germany, where May 8th was largely and deliberately ignored in the first 2 post-war decades. Makes a certain amount of sense, actually, right? It's like, this is the day we lost the war. How much celebrating do we want to do? Even if we finally come to the realization, and it wasn't a sure thing in the first couple of decades after the war, that they would nationally come to the realization that they needed to own up to their Nazi past, confront it, and reject it. But they did eventually do that. But that was an ongoing process, and he talks a little bit about that here. This changed, the ignoring of the holiday for the first 2 decades. This changed after Chancellor Willy Brandt, as part of a general attempt to establish a more critical understanding of the Nazi past and a better relationship with Germany's eastern neighbors, including East Germany, embraced the idea of May 8th as a day of liberation in 1970. Not that long after the war. I mean, it felt like it took years, I'm sure, but now looking back on things, like when you get old and you're like, 5 years to a kid is an eternity. To me, it's nothing, right? Okay, just pointing that out. For many German conservatives, this was an outlandish provocation, made worse because it came from Brandt, the leader of the Social Democratic Party, who had been forced to flee into exile in Norway after the Nazis rose to power in 1933. German conservatives argued that it was ridiculous to celebrate Germany's defeat in World War II, and saw Brandt's reframing as part of what they perceived as a disgraceful, unpatriotic denigration pushed by a dangerously left-wing chancellor. Now you get to see the parallels. Conservatives lost the fight over May 8th, however, when one of their own, West German President Richard von, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's like Weizsäcker, but it sure looks like Wiseacre, which, probably isn't the pronunciation, but Weizsäcker, I'm guessing. Well, I don't know how you pronounce those A's with the umlauts over it. But anyway, you probably know if you remember him because he was a president of West Germany. Me, I don't remember. But anyway, this changed when he unambiguously declared it a day of liberation in his speech during the ceremony commemorating the end of the war in 1985. 40 years later, right? Von Weizsäcker, I guess, maybe, was not only president and an extremely well-regarded member of the conservative Christian Democratic Party, he had also himself been an officer in Hitler's army and fought on the Eastern Front. The video of his speech is made available by link in Zimmer's tweet thread here, which you'll see in the summary today. I'll do that one myself as Scott's out. Hope you're having a good day, though, Scott, maybe even listening. And here is an official translation of the speech into English, in case you want to read it as well. In a way, Zimmer continues, the conservative critics of the Day of Liberation idea had been right. In a way, Germany was indeed defeated in 1945. The Allies didn't liberate Germany, they liberated Germany's victims in the concentration camps, the political prisoners, and those living in hiding. So, that's kind of an interesting angle on things. It's true. And the contemporaneous perception at the end of the war among the vast majority of Germans was dominated not by a feeling of liberation, but defeat, insecurity, and fear. Few Germans concerned themselves with the victims of Nazi terror, for whom May 8th indeed did bring liberation. Today, May 8th is observed as a day of remembrance in Germany. It's not a public holiday, however, an arrangement that perhaps adequately captures the fact that while rejoicing at Hitler's defeat, Germans should remember on which side they fought. And yet, establishing the idea of a day of liberation was immensely important as a political project. It stated, to put it in basic terms, that Nazi Germany's defeat was something to be celebrated. The Germans should rejoice because they got liberated from themselves. The debate over May 8th was also a manifestation of a larger shift in Germany's ongoing struggle to deal with the Nazi past, a development which it also accelerated and to which it lent credence in turn. By the 1990s, the Holocaust had been elevated to the center of German national identity. Interesting, right, for them to opt to do that. As former President Joachim Gauck, I hope I'm not murdering that name too bad, put it on Holocaust Remembrance Day in January of 2015, there is no German identity without Auschwitz. That's a hell of a statement. And more generally, a consensus had formed around centering not the defeat of 1945, not the concern for national honor, but the victims of Nazi terror and genocide, and the responsibilities that follow from acknowledging Germany's crimes for the country's present and future. Let's look at how the reaction of some U.S. conservatives to Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday compares to the story of May 8th and Germany's ongoing struggle to come to terms with Nazi past more generally. There are quite a few similarities in rhetoric, style, and substance. There's the perception of Juneteenth as being established to disgrace the nation, the idea of an anti-patriotic humiliation ritual could have been transported straight from the West German 1970s. And here included is another of Jamel Bouie's tweets saying he's having a hard time understanding this tweet as anything other than anti-black racism. It is the tweet of, I don't know who that is, Pegobri. I'm not even certain who that guy is. But anyway, look, this person says, in a good world, Juneteenth would be a great national holiday about celebrating America. In this world, the entire project is about creating more anti-American humiliation rituals, right? That's what Zimmer is talking about. Zimmer then goes on to look at the tweet from Representative Congressman Matt Rosendale, who said he voted against Juneteenth. He says, there is also the fact that conservatives see themselves in a fight against corrosive left-wing subversion and claim they're being confronted with a radical left-wing agenda enacted by Biden here and Chancellor Brandt there. Same idea here when Charlie Kirk makes his tweet, right? And Juneteenth is to replace July 4th. The end of slavery, Zimmer goes on, is one of America's darkest moments. Right here he includes Matt Rosendale's infamous tweet that the intent is to replace the 4th of July with this new day when it will inevitably focus on America's darkest moments. End of slavery. The end of slavery is a dark moment. The fear that once people start questioning the patriotic white nationalist tale of history, they might also come to reject the idea of America as a country in which white Christians deserve to dominate. Finally, the contexts are similar in the sense that these symbolic fights happened against the background of a general liberalization and a widespread fear among conservatives to lose or have lost political and cultural hegemony to the left. At first glance, however, these similarities are puzzling. Germany's conservatives at least had a point. This is the one that I really like here. Germany's conservatives at least had a point. Regardless of where one stands on the reactionary political project, Germany was defeated in 1945. It was a case of the defeated celebrating defeat. But why would anybody object to celebrating the end of slavery? It became possible, the end of slavery, because the United States, the country that conservatives, these conservatives who are tweeting, the country these conservatives claim to love, won and defeated a traitorous rebellion. Why are conservatives acting like they're told to celebrate their own defeat? And what's really happening here, I guess, another or an underlying theme here is, the problem is that black people win in this, and we can't have that. Can't both be winners, right? I don't know why they can't imagine that. But anyway, that's a really important point. How could they claim to love the United States and not want to celebrate a giant victory for the United States? It's not about celebrating a defeat unless you think losing all your slaves was the defeat. Well, one important part of the answer, as he goes on, is, of course, negative polarization, a point that Seth Maskett here makes brilliantly in the tweet that's embedded here. In today's political landscape, if our enemy is in favor, we must be opposed. He just says here, Seth Maskett does, I swear, negative polarization is so strong right now, President Biden could create a holiday commemorating the end of slavery, and some people would find a way to oppose it. And indeed, they have. He's just kidding. He was talking about what was happening right then and there. But there's something more going on here, just like there's always been more to the German struggles over the Nazi past. There is an underlying conflict over who gets to determine what America is and consequently what the country's political, social, and cultural order should be. The answer to the question of why are conservatives acting like they're told to celebrate their own defeat is because in a way that's exactly what's happening. They're not the successors to the defeated Confederacy in any legal sense, of course, and unlike Germany's post-war conservatives, they weren't personally defeated in the Civil War. But if we look deeper at the central fault lines that have defined the American project since the beginning, there are important continuities between the two sides that fought over slavery in the 1860s and opposing sides in today's conflict over Juneteenth. There are different ways to frame these continuities. In How the South Won the Civil War, H.C. Richardson identifies the ideology on which the Confederacy was built as the conviction that the world should be dominated by wealthy white men. Other historians identify the conflict between civic nationalism and racial nationalism as the core dynamic shaping the American project. And, of course, there's plenty more to discuss on that front. But we end it here with the one tweet that Patrick pointed us to. Whenever they can, wherever they can, Republicans are using the power of the state to outlaw dissent, restrict critical debate, and punish anyone who dares to question the righteousness of past, present, or future white reactionary rule.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Pretty interesting, right? That's a hell of a way to sum it all up. Take a look at the rest of that thread. It's something deep and interesting to think about. I really love the Germany angle on that because that's actually extra embarrassing. But really, posing that question, why are you acting like this is a celebration of a defeat? It was a great victory. Think about this and more wider and greater subjects next.